Discussion keeps the world turning.
This is Roundtable.
You're listening to Roundtable. I'm Niu Honglin, joined by Steve and Yushun. Coming up soon. For many graduates, memories of university dorm life are inseparable from shared rooms, late-night conversations, crowded desks, and the constant background noise of commute living. But today's students are entering a new, very different world, one where privacy, comfort, and study environments are receiving far greater attention. The decision to phase out 8-person dorm rooms in Heilongjiang province has got netizens' attention since it signals a shift not only in infrastructure, but also in how we think about student well-being and the purpose of campus life. If you have ever lived in a dorm with more than half-dozen roommates, you know the experience can be both unforgettable and a bit chaotic, depending on your roommates. From juggling schedules to negotiating lights-out times, sharing a room with many people is almost a rite of passage in university life. That is why, when it comes to Heilongjiang province, when they're discussing whether or not they should change the tradition a little bit, phase out the 8-person dormitory, it opened a conversation about what modern student living should be like. And I find this very interesting because personally, I have had the experience of living in multi-people rooms. But for me, because at the very first day of school year, one of my roommates just didn't show up. So the school didn't know that she's not going to show up, so they didn't put anybody in. So for me, it was only a 4-people room. And for me, in university, I only had 2 roommates for 2 years.
Oh.
So I never
So
had...
it's supposed to be 4-people room, but
Exactly.
but only 2 people living in there.
But I had the experience of living in a short, I think it's a study trip in a different province. And at that time, it was 12 people living in one room.
One dorm room.
One dorm room, 12 girls.
That must have been a huge room, though.
It's a huge room and it was not that bad for me because all of my roommates are lovely and we share chores and we take shifts. But of course, when it comes to living in a place, living in a room with 7 other people for 4 years, it can be a challenge. How about you, both of you? Do you have experience of living in multi-people dorms?
My college years offered me a dorm with 4 people. And I think I had this kind of similar situation. We only have 3 people that was like living in their dorm, actually. And then, that was not a bad experience. And we have that separated desks for each one of us. And
Can you describe the room for us? Is it like an apartment style? Is it simply like a bedroom where you have 2 bunk beds on both sides?
we don't have bunk beds. We have just 3 or 4 beds in the room, and then 4 desks in front of us and our own shelves, and then a balcony and our like private bathroom and everything. And I think a lot of students would say that is quite luxury, to be honest.
That sounds like it's nicer than some hotels I've stayed in.
But the thing is that I can understand how like when there are a lot of people living in that same room, because even 3 people living in there, we can have so many arguments, disputes, and everything, because I know you are not having that kind of bad intention to be like that. Sometimes you cannot control like snoring and everything.
People have different habits.
Yes, you cannot change that, and more people means that you need to maybe tolerate more little habits of others.
Yeah. When I was in university for the first 2 years, I lived on campus because I wanted that experience.
Yeah.
So in my first year, I lived with 3 other guys. 2 of them I knew, 1 of them I knew, and 2 I didn't know. So it was a friend of mine from my high school plus 2 strangers. That was a fun experience. They were great people. Second year, I decided to continue at the campus, but with different roommates, friends that I had made during that first year. So it was 4 buddies living together for the second year. It was a 2-bedroom apartment with a separate living room and a separate kitchen and bathroom. This is on campus. Not large. It sounds like I'm talking about a big place, but it wasn't big at all. It was 4 guys living there. We had fun, but it was disgusting, honestly. I mean, anytime you have 4 guys living in a relatively small space, it's just gross, isn't it?
I did a tiny little survey in the office and find out that for people my age, usually living in a 6-person dorm or an 8-person dorm was quite common. And then people Yushun's age, living in a 4-person's room is a bit more common. And I thought it was just the development of society until I realized that actually national guidelines issued in 2024 encourage universities to aim for 4-person rooms for undergraduates, 2-person rooms for master students, and single rooms for doctoral candidates. It makes sense because you need a bit more space to study, and you are also paying a little more for the relatively high-end rooms. And that is why I checked the tuition fee and also refreshed my memory about the dorm fee here in China. It's still quite really cheap. For my time, living in a 4-person's room on campus takes around 600 to 800 yuan every year. And
Wow.
even here these days, here in China, for example, if we're talking about Tsinghua University, which is one of the very best universities here in China, the tuition fee every year is from 5,000 to 10,000, depending on whether or not you're graduate, postgraduate, undergraduate, or even doctoral. And also the dormitory fee is still around 900 yuan to 1,600 yuan, depending on whether or not it is a 4-person's room or 2-person's room. And in Fudan University, similar situation. Tuition fee less than 10,000, and also the dormitory, 4-person's dormitory, 1,200 yuan every year, still quite cheap. But the situation in other countries beg to differ. We see, for example, in Harvard University, the tuition fee every year would be around 403,000 yuan every year, and the dormitory fee would be around 90,000 Chinese yuan. That is 12,500 US dollars. So definitely, if we're talking about the situation here in China, I think
It's not even comparable.
definitely not. So
You
that's
said 800 yuan for the year.
for a year.
That's a little over $100 for the entire...
Exactly.
Goodness me.
That is why always, in my opinion, I feel like the dorms on campus is offered to students as a kind of benefit. It's so that you can have a place to stay. That is why when I realized that Heilongjiang province, as well as many other cities in different provinces, are improving the well-being and living situation and experience of students on campus, I find that quite interesting and very, very nice, because they're definitely not gaining any profit out of this.
I think, first of all, of course, a lot of these universities are upgrading their dormitories, and it has been there that what you said, 4-to-1 like standard for newly built student dormitories. And Heilongjiang is definitely not the first one. Previously, provinces such as Shanxi province and Guangdong province has introduced new regulations on university dormitory construction, explicitly calling for a reduction in the number of students per room and listing like 8-person dormitories as a type of to be phased out. And the thing is that I've seen some of the like recommendation or measures introducing the 4-to-1 standard is showing that, of course, when we're like thinking back, maybe living in a small room with 8 people, it can also reflect a good habit of you are persistent, or you have the good quality of living through a tough life.
I think prison can accomplish that same goal.
I don't think it's because of that
But
they
the thing
designed the
is that
rooms.
we are
How
at a
much can you take?
we're at a different era, right? And we are at a different kind of a economic situation right now. We don't need our students to live a life like that. That is why I think more and more these dormitories are phasing out. And the thing is that, it is very important to let people know that they're saying that we should not make 苦硬吃. If we don't have that kind of difficulty, we should not create that kind of difficulty.
Just to prove that we can conquer those problems.
Well, I mean, it's not like it's torture. Well, depending on who you're living with, I guess,
Yes.
right?
Yes,
Having a bad roommate can really change things, but it can be a wonderful experience too. The people that I lived with that I just talked about a few minutes ago. A couple of those people are still my very close friends today. So you can create lasting bonds in a forced, enclosed environment like that. But I guess one of the issues, too, is, who's going to pay for this, right? Talk about the fact that it is very, very affordable. 800 yuan. You blew my mind with that statistic, by the way. But the pressure, they say, it shouldn't just be on the schools to kind of foot the bill for these changes that they're planning on making. The first step is government investment, and that was pointed out by an academic committee member of the Chinese Society of Educational Development Strategy. He said that, and he also believes that the new 5-year plan has once again called for improving quality and expanding the capacity of higher education with a focus on increasing the proportion of undergraduate and graduate students. That's a fancy way of saying make the experience better, make the livability of the dorms a little bit better, improvements there so that there's a better overall well-being, if you will, for the students.
If you're like me, if you have left campus life for more than 10 years, then let me refresh your impression of the campus life these days. It's no longer like our generation when we have to get hot water from outside of the dorm room, where there were no air conditioning whatsoever, and you have to in some of the dorm rooms, I think there were no private bathrooms. Nowadays, not only do they enjoy all these things I just said, you can get hot water right in your dorm room, which means if it's a rainy day, you don't have to carry an umbrella and a lot of different kettles and everything anymore. And also they have washing machines in the dorm. They have air conditioning in the dorm, and some dorm rooms with a very nice lady being the manager will also provide a little public space, cultural corner, they call it. You can even study and socializing a little bit in that, almost like a
common area.
A living room area for the entire dorm. And also within the campus, the facilities are really good. The libraries, as well as I think many of the buildings are equipped with high-end computers for different special majors. So my question is, campuses and universities are upgrading all of these things without charging too much extra or nearly as enough as extra to cover the cost of upgrading these places. What if, because we know that they're not expanding enrollment all the time, what if they hit a point where these places are simply not that necessarily need anymore? What if they become a little empty?
Kind of like hotel vacancies,
yeah.
right? One of the things that my university does, I went to St. Mary's University in Halifax, Nova Scotia. One of the things that they do is they rent out the dorms to tourists in the summertime.
Really? Wow.
Halifax gets a tremendous amount of tourists from both other provinces in Canada and also American tourists too. And the university campus, which is right downtown, you can rent the dorm rooms, the same rooms that the students use during the semesters, for you as an individual traveler or with your partner or with your family, whatever your situation is. That's
interesting.
a good idea, isn't it?
Yes, that reminds me of the fact that some universities would open their playgrounds, their libraries, and some public buildings, well, relatively public buildings, to the general public, to the community, so that when it's not very busy, especially during summer holidays and winter holidays, it can also benefit for people living in the community.
In some cases, some universities are having that kind of open campus, which means that the buildings doesn't have any fence or anything. But some of the universities, for the safety concern, they have. It's a closed university, but repurposing is also one of the ways that these universities are doing or planning to do for maybe in the future there aren't that many students living in that dorm. They could be repurposed into like shared community spaces, common rooms, and study hubs or multifunctional student centers that support maybe a wider range of campus life. And also, experts are suggesting a very more cautious approach with the college age population expected to peak in around 2034. Universities could rely more on renting nearby housing instead of just building too much too soon. That way they can just meet today's demand without risking a surplus tomorrow.
Oh, yes. For a lot of famous universities, especially in the city center area, they cannot really build more dormitories for students, so they would negotiate with nearby residential buildings or related buildings so that they can solve the problem without making too much change that they cannot afford. So today's young students, enjoy your campus life. You will miss it like I am really missing university life now. And that brings us to the end of today's roundtable. We'd love to hear your thoughts on today's topics. Leave us a comment wherever you listen to your podcast or send us an email to roundtablepodcast@qq.com. Deep dives and nuanced views. We are clearing the table for now, but may the ideas stay with you. I'm Niu Honglin with Steve and Yushun. Thanks for listening. Bye-bye.